This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free creativity blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In this episode, I speak with author James Dodkins, and we talk about why the best organizations put their customers second, how to connect with influencers, and visions and values. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by James Dodkins. James Dodkins helps companies create outstanding and unforgettable customer experiences. As a speaker, author, trainer, and consultant, he travels the globe learning the secrets of the world's best performing companies, and he uses that information to help organizations replicate that success. James specializes in customer experience and customer centricity and is principal consultant at BP Group. His new book is called Put Your Customers Second and will be hitting the stores very soon. It's my great pleasure to have James join us today. So welcome, James.
Thank you for having me.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Well, at the moment, I'm working hard on this book, and the book is kind of an exploration into companies who create outstanding customer experiences, not by putting their customers first, but by putting their employees first. So companies that realize that if you do want to put your customers first, then you have to put your employees first, if that makes sense. It's just exploring the different companies that do that and have succeeded doing that, the mindsets they use, some frameworks and methodologies in there, and some cool little stories about how they've succeeded.
So we're going to get into kind of talking about some of the key principles in the book. Before we do that, I think is this your second or your third book now?
Second
book. And after having done the first book, kind of as you started to kind of approach writing this book, was there anything you changed about the kind of the writing process, the creative process, the researching process, or the editing? Is there anything that you're doing differently for this one?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, this book's kind of completely different from the first because I never wanted to write the first book. I kind of got forced to.
How did you end up getting forced to write a book? That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, well, what it was, I created basically a new model to organise businesses. So moving away from the traditional pyramid, like hierarchical way of doing things to a concentric circle model. And of course, travel around the world, talk at conferences about this stuff, talk to many different people. And while it was gaining a little bit of traction, more and more people started talking about it. And one of two things would happen. Either people would get it wrong and attribute it to me, or get it right and not attribute it to me. So I got given the advice that, look, if you really want to set the record straight and basically claim it as your own thing, you got to write a book. And so I was like, oh, God, do I really? And yeah, so I'm pretty sure the first half of the book is me complaining that I've got to write a book.
So if your first book was a book being forced upon you, you had to write it because it was something you just had to do. With this second one, why did you feel compelled to write this particular book about this subject?
Well, it was quite a weird one, to be honest with you, because all my career in customer experience has been customer first, customer first, customer first. And then time and time again, like you hear certain sort of leaders in companies say that we put our employee first, blah, 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 blah. But to be honest, I never really believed that. I thought it was kind of a platitude where they were just saying it because it was a good soundbite. But the more and more I heard it, the more and more I became compelled to look into it. And as I looked more into it, I realized, you know what, there's actually, this has got some legs. So I decided to do more and more research. And just as the research piled up, I was like, well, you know what, I'd love to actually compile this together and share this with people, because I'm not a big fan of business books. I think they're all too long. They've all got far too much waffle in there. They're not very engaging. And so the way I've written this book is it's a story. So it's a story about a young executive who gets given like the seemingly impossible task of turning his company's fortunes around by putting the customer first. So what he decides to do is make a list of all the companies who've ever given him extremely good customer experience. And he reaches out to them and starts to go and meet with the people responsible for it. And what he starts to find out pretty early on is that these particular companies, the way that they do it is by focusing on their culture, focusing on their employees. And to start with, he's very disillusioned, and he's quite angry in a way that his ideas have been completely wrong all along. But of course, by the end of the book, he comes round to the idea, and not to spoil things, but everybody lives happily ever after.
So that model, actually, the kind of structure of the book, writing that way, because I agree with you. Most business books are absolutely, I mean, having someone that did an MBA, I remember having to read all these kind of business books, kind of going through that, and still reading a lot of business books. Most of them are incredibly badly written, for a start. And they, as you say, there's a huge amount of waffle. You know, if you could probably condense most of them down into like a 2-page executive summary and just say people the problem. But the storytelling way that you kind of went at it, it sounds a little bit kind of similar to someone, I think, like Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited, or you know, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Making. So you're actually using a more of a story type of narrative rather than the, you know, the kind of classic kind of, this is the framework and just kind of go and do it this way. Yeah,
it's like some of the favorite books I've ever read have been things like The 1 Minute Manager, Built to Sell. There's been loads of books out there that have been written in that format, and for me personally, they're just far more engaging. And the thing is, I'm pretty sure there's going to be plenty of people out there that don't like that style, but that's okay. At the end of the day, I'm writing this book for people who are a little bit like me, who really need to be engaged in a book to be able to get through it. So hopefully those are the people that are going to appreciate it and take the most from it.
Now, how did you get into this world of kind of customer experience, customer centricity? Because my understanding is that initially you were like a guitarist in a rock band. So yes. How does a rock guitarist go into the world of kind of corporate consulting?
Well, it's an interesting. Well, I think it's an interesting story. You might not.
Well, I come from the music industry, I'm always fascinated by people that have come from the music industry and then go into a very different area.
Well, so I played guitar in a heavy metal band. We released 2 albums. We were signed. We toured the world. We had a video on TV. We were in magazines. But I started that at a very early age. We basically won a couple of competitions in a magazine in the UK, and it got us a lot of exposure, really, that we weren't particularly ready for. So we got shot to prominence a little bit early in our musical careers. So toured around, did all of that fun stuff. But it kind of it all fell apart as which is maybe a story for another day. But it got to the point where I was like, okay, so what do I do now? I've been an international rock god. What is the logical next step for me? So I went into insurance.
Of course, that is absolutely the logical next step.
Exactly. So I did that, and again, it wasn't any big master plan. It was just there was a company that was the biggest company near where I lived at the time, and I went and worked with those guys, and I got really lucky because they grew incredibly quickly. And it gave me lots of opportunities to progress, far greater than I would have ever had if I would have joined like an already massive company. So I progressed through the company, made loads of really good contacts. We administered insurance for all sorts of different companies in all sorts of different industries. So I learned a lot about lots of different industries. And what I started to realize quite quickly is that there's nuggets of gold in every different industry, in every different company. Every company has got something that you can learn from. And I always thought, well, wouldn't it be brilliant if there could be people that went out there, learned all these different things in these different companies, and then could put them together into little methodologies and frameworks and teach them to other people. Then I got made redundant and thought, well, you know what? Why couldn't that person be me? And the rest is history, really. And that's pretty much what I do now. Travel around the world. Learn from the best performing companies what it is that they do, what they have done to get to that point, put it together and try and put it together in simple frameworks that other people can replicate. And yeah, so that's.
So today, I mean, you're a trainer, you're a speaker, you're an author, and a consultant. So did the consulting part come first, and then added on the training, and then the speaking, and then the writing? Was that the kind of order of things?
It was more training first, because. Putting together things into methodologies, and then it was just about training people to do it for themselves. Because I am a big believer that, like, to get anything to stick in an organization, you have to be doing it for yourself. You can't just get people in to to do it for you. But then I got more and more requests for hey, can you come and help us do this? Yeah, the training is great, but can you hold our hand along the way? So the consultancy came as more of a secondary thing. The writing came off the back of that. And I suppose the speaking has been pretty much the golden thread that runs through all of it, because I'm a big believer that you've got to share your ideas as well. It's not just about keeping them all to yourself. I think the more that you share ideas, the more people are going to use them, the more people are going to progress them and evolve them. And that's only going to be good for the entire community, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking, I know a lot of trainers that make that move from trainer to speaker on stage, they obviously have the content, that's usually not the biggest challenge for them, but they lack some of the stage skills and some of the, dynamics, the kind of storytelling features of great speakers as well. With your background, having originally come from the music industry, so you've obviously being very used to being up on stages and doing that, was that easier for you, or was actually, did that kind of potentially, was that a bit of a hindrance?
In all honesty, I think it has helped me, because I don't really get, don't get me wrong, there's still an element of nerves when you stand up in front of big crowds, but it's not been as stifling as it could have been if I didn't have the years of doing it day in, day out. I love being on stage. I love the buzz of being on stage. I love people getting enthusiastic about ideas. Of course, standing up on stage talking about business things isn't quite as exciting as playing in front of 3,000 people that are all singing the songs to your words, the words to your songs. But it's a good substitute, and I really enjoy it, and I really look forward to doing talks like that. Yeah, there's always nerves. I think if it ever gets to the point that you aren't nervous before, whether it be stepping out on stage to play a song, whether it be speaking in front of people, whether it be doing anything, I think maybe you need to ask yourself the question, why am I not nervous? Do I not care about this anymore?
And in the book, you have these kind of 7 elements as you kind of go through the story of creating a customer-centric culture. I'm intrigued, maybe as you kind of go through just the kind of top line of what each of those 7 elements are. I'm interested, where the ideas for them came, where the inspiration came. Was it working with particular companies that you saw that particular thing, or was it more a mishmash, an amalgamation, a mashup of working with different types of businesses that allowed you to kind of eventually refine that and come to these 7 elements?
Well, it's really from it's the research for the book that's caused me to take these from them. So I've been lucky enough to get some really good content from people like Google, Zappos, Virgin, Ritz Carlton, Lego, Adobe, Southwest Airlines, and these are the 7 things that seem to crop up most regularly, and it's vision and values, alignment, capabilities, workplace, incentives, resources, and empowerment. And it seems that you can't create a world-beating culture without all 7 of these elements in place. It's kind of what I'm referring to at the moment, the 7 beams of the cultural spectrum. But I don't know if I'm going to stick on that or not. I don't know.
That sounds like a Pink Floyd album now that we're kind of getting into. But on that, because you said like being able to do that research with like Google and the Zappos of this world, Southwest. I mean, how do you even kind of get in to have those conversations to be able to do that research? Is it a very difficult process to be able to get in there and kind of learn from these companies, or are they actually very open to sharing their knowledge?
Some are and some aren't. For me, again, traveling around the world, being at lots of conferences, you meet lots of people in person. But for the people that I didn't have any contacts with, really, there was one of 2 ways that I got in contact. It was either connect with a bunch of people on LinkedIn and ping them a message saying, hey, I'm writing a book, can I pick your brains? Or going just through their PR or media department saying, hey, I'm writing a book, can I talk to someone, please? And they usually quite happy to match you up. Some companies aren't at all, but other companies are really open to it and really happy to put you in touch with people that love to talk about what it is they do. And I think realistically, that's probably part of their culture.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think about someone like Zappos, and obviously Tony Hsieh wrote a book which was very much about culture and it was kind of explaining about their culture as well. But you have some other ones in there, like, the Ritz Carlton, I think, is one of the ones that I seem to remember is the one you kind of talk with. And I don't think about them so much from a cultural. I mean, I think about them in terms of excellence, quality of excellence, but you don't think about them so much in terms of the culture. But is there something that you found when you were doing that particular one that you thought, actually, this is really interesting, I really want to incorporate this into the book?
Well, Ritz Carlton is an interesting one because one of the proudest things I am about the first book is that Herv Hummler, the president of Ritz Carlton, gave me a really lovely write-up for that book, and he said it was an inspiring story, and I thought that was, that's in the customer experience world, Ritz Carlton are pretty much the pinnacle, and so to have somebody as high up as Herv take the time to write to me to tell me like his feedback on the book was really, really good. But one of the main things that sticks out with Ritz Carlton is empowerment, how they empower their employees to do little things like, I don't know, just leave birthday presents in rooms and things like that. They don't have to ask permission. They don't have to go through a big long procedure of finding if it's okay to give somebody $5 worth of a cake in their room. They just do it. It's lots of little things that they know that are just going to put a smile on people's faces, and they're all empowered to be able to do that. And now, whether that be the president all the way down to a cleaner, they can all do that. What
about the vision piece? I mean, often we think of, especially large companies, they have this big vision, it's up on the wall and it's things like that. But my understanding is that when you come at the vision thing, it's from a slightly different perspective, especially when it comes to customer centricity.
Well, it's vision and values together, and you can't just have the one thing. And that's what I'm starting to realize with this, is that you could have a company that has a brilliant vision and a brilliant set of values, but if they don't have any of the other things, it's not really going to be worth it, because that paired with alignment is really a big part of this. It's making sure that your vision and your values influence every single decision that's made in the company, and every single thing you do, from the way that you pay your people to the way that you hire your people to the way that you fire your people. Everything has to be really informed by the vision and values.
And I'm guessing that the founders have a big part. I mean, I'm thinking of something like Zappos and Virgin, two very kind of inspiring founders, and it almost feels like it's kind of difficult to sense where their values end and the companies begin. They seem to be quite similar.
Well, yeah, and that's not a bad thing. That's almost a better thing, because realistically, why would you have one set of values for yourself and one set of values for a company? Surely values they're universal. Like, for instance, I personally have got a set of values, and they're no different to my personal life than they are to my work life.
So it's just kind of having that. I guess it'll also allow you to make much quicker decisions. And I'm thinking here, a friend of mine, Derek Sivers, started a company called CDBaby. And when they were initially growing, and it grew up into a big company, and he sold it for 100 million plus, I think in the end. But one of the things that they used to do was whenever in the early days, when there was maybe like 20 or 30 employees, if there was ever a decision, someone was unsure about something, what he would often do is you kind of stop everyone, and you can only really do this when you've got a smaller team, and he would kind of bring everyone together and said, okay, this is my thinking about this thing. So and so rather than just like creating a standard operating procedure for something, he was trying to imbue an understanding of his values in why these things mattered.
Yeah, the thing is, if you've basically got these set of guidelines, then it makes decision making a lot easier, because half of the job's already done. Does it align with our vision, and does it align with our values? If the answer is no, then don't do it. I know it sounds a little bit simplified, but that's as simple as it needs to be. As long as you've defined them properly, you shouldn't have much of a problem with that.
And can you tell us about a time in your own work, in your own career, maybe where you worked on a project, you worked with a client, and obviously have to say who they were, but you worked with them and you put your heart and your soul into this project, and it just didn't turn out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience? Well,
I mean, tell you what, I mean, I can tell you a bit of a story that sort of relates back to my personal values. So I've got 8 personal values there: honesty, fun, curiosity, simplicity, creativity, bravery, generosity, and passion. Okay, and each one of those means different things. But under honesty, it lies integrity. And there was a company I was working with, and they wanted to do a project, and they outlined what the project was, and we basically agreed we were going to do it. But then they said, well, look, we've got to send it, we've got to do an request for proposal, we've got to ask other companies to bid for the work, and then basically we're going to choose you, but we have to because of our rules. And I was like, hang on a second, so you definitely want to do this work? Yes. You definitely want to do it with me and then the company? And I said, yes. They said, so why are you asking other people to put time and effort and giving them false hope into bidding for this work? And they said, well, we just have to. It's part of our rules. It's part of our procedures. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be part of that, because that showed a massive lack of integrity. I would have preferred it if they would have said, well, you might not get the work. Someone else might come along and we might go with them. But that seemed completely, and again, I won't share with you who it was, but that seemed just completely opposed to my values. So in the end, I turned down the work.
So you're worried you were going to be complicit in a lie in that way?
Well, yeah. And the thing is, I do think that's bang out of order, to be honest with you, to reach out to companies, to get them to invest time and energy and money to bid for work that the person who's asking them to do it knows that they 100% have got no chance of getting, just so they can tick a box on a procurement system. I'm not.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, and I hear this sometimes come from other consultants as well, where they say we'll often be brought in, in maybe like an initial strategy session, almost in order to look for frames of reference for the work and a scope and things. And the client will often say, we want you to come with us with some ideas as well. And unfortunately, there are some unscrupulous clients out there that are basically just looking at this as a great way of getting new ideas for what they're doing as well. So I guess that would very strongly kind of go against your having those kind of core values that you have at the heart of what you do.
Definitely. And look, at the end of the day, if anybody's ever been through that, it's not such a bad thing, because it's kind of like they're doing you a favor by letting you know what sort of people they are to work with.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's a bit of a red flag. It's avoiding a bully. There's no way that you want to be working with people that are willing to do that. Realistic. Yes, paying the bills is important. Putting food on the table is important. But at the end of the day, for me, honesty and integrity are tantamount. You can't go against that.
And what? Absolutely. I'm just thinking here though. When you have, so you mentioned those kind of 8 values that you have, and this relates to an organization as well. What happens when those values are there's maybe something, and those values end up conflicting with each other? So you have to make, you mentioned one, simplicity there. And maybe there is something, but it's in conflict with maybe one of your other values. Well, is it a hierarchy? Is it, going from number 1 is honesty, going down? Is that how you kind of grade something? Is that the best way that organizations can think about, well, this absolutely has simplicity at its heart, so I'm much more likely to do this rather than this other thing, which has one of my other values maybe further down at the heart of it?
That's a good question, and it's not really it's not a problem I personally have come across before, and it's not really a problem I've heard about before. I think if you define your values properly, they wouldn't be sort of in battle with each other. They'd all complement each other. And so if you have different possibilities, I suppose the way that you would choose them is the one that ticks the most boxes of your values, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good question. And it's one I'm going to give a little bit more thought to after this, because it's not really something I've considered before. It's
one I was involved in an organization before, and they were having a kind of a little bit of battle because they had 2 values very strongly, and they were kind of like in their top values, but there was a particular project they were really struggling with because it was kind of going for different values, and they had to and in the end this is incredibly simplistic, but basically got down to the decision of like, okay, if these 2 values were in a like a football match or soccer match together, like which one would win? And so to give some way of putting some gradation on these things as well. As you were kind of going through your career as a consultant, as a trainer, as a speaker, as author, was there a key insight or light bulb moment, an aha moment in your life where you went, okay, this is the direction I want to be going with my work, or it was a key distinction you made in the kind of work that you do?
Yes, and it's happened relatively recently, to be honest with you. And I used to never tell anyone about my musical past. Okay, I used to try and keep that a secret because I thought in the sort of in the business world, people would look at you differently if you opened with, "I used to play guitar in a heavy metal band." And sitting down, looking at my values, I realised, you know what? I haven't been being honest this time. I realised that within honesty is being myself and being honest about who I am and being honest about my past. And it led me to realise that, hang on a second, look, if I'm going to be working with a company and they, for some reason, don't like me because I used to do something like that, then I don't want to be working with them anyway. And ever since I've made that decision, I'm just going to be myself. This is who I am. If you like it, fantastic. We're going to get on great. If you don't, that's a shame. We're probably not going to work together. I felt a lot more free, a lot more liberated, and a lot more empowered. And so that was a massive turning point for me. Just realizing that, God, just be yourself.
Yeah, because I mean, you work a lot with obviously corporations, companies, and we often think of those. Okay, well, I need to like hide all the other bits of me, whether it's as a speaker or as a consultant, that actually make me. So, but I always think, I think that especially as we're getting newer generations coming into businesses and attending conferences, they we definitely feels like we're moving from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. And so being much more kind of open about yourself and just much more human, really, rather than being this kind of like guru or something up there on the stage.
Yeah, and it's amazing the amount of people that come to you afterwards and go, you know what, I used to play guitar in a little local band and I used to love it. And then you start talking about music and you make far better connections than going, hello, I'm a consultant and I do business. Oh, God, it does. You are right. It makes people realise you're a human. You've had a life other than this. And a lot of people are really interested in it, which is really cool. And so I took a bit of a leap with it, and I'm glad that it's worked out the way that it has.
And it's funny when you tell other people about some of the maybe a music background or some other thing. I find, as you said, like there's really fascinating people come and say, "Oh, I'm in a band at the weekend," or I heard a CEO came up to me recently and said, I don't really kind of share this, but I'm really into like happy house music. I'm a huge happy house, and whenever I'm running these big events, I basically have my earbuds in it, and that's what keeps me going, like having this big happy house music going on as well. So it's just kind of getting back to the human. We're human. What about when it comes to kind of online resources or tools or apps? Are there ones that you found kind of very useful for the work you do as a writer, as a trainer, as a speaker and author?
Well, I mean, there's like the audiobook apps. I think they're pretty decent. I just use the standard Apple one, whatever it's called, iBooks or iTunes. That's just great for having things with you on the go. So if you've got a spare 5-10 minutes, you stick your earphones and you can learn a little bit more. But other than that, the probably like the apps and things I use the most are notes on my phone and the camera. Just taking photos of things that inspire you or give you ideas, and just making little notes of ideas that pop through your head. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night with an idea, and of course the first thing that's next to me is my phone. Grab it, make a little note. The amount of times I wake up in the morning and look back at them and go, "Oh, you know what? That was pretty inspired in my sleep." So just notes and the camera on my phone. They're simple things, but I find them super useful. What
was the last thing when you were out and about? Maybe not necessarily working, but you just kind of out and about and you saw something, you took a photo, or you quickly wrote a note because you just saw an example of a great customer experience, or a company that they were getting it right, and you just wanted to kind of snap that photo, write that note so you would remember it.
Well, I think that the last thing that I spent a lot of time writing my notes was about the idea of companies setting up different companies specifically to be their competitors. Mm-hmm. So, and there's not that many companies that do it, but I found the idea fascinating. So imagine you're a massive company. Let's say you're, I don't know, a Microsoft or a GE or a BMW. Imagine, because of course, like lots of companies really want to sort of innovate. They really want to disrupt the market, but they don't want to mess up what they've already got. So I found the idea of literally setting up a completely different company whose main job is to be your competitor, like to fight yourself, you versus you. I found fascinating. I found it really clever. And of course, if that company does well, you absorb it back into your company and you revolutionize. If it doesn't, you've messed up it, but at least you haven't ruined everything else to do that, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say.
It's a really fascinating idea. I was involved in consulting with a company. It was an education institution, and I was brought in to help them with starting the online version of their institution. And it was fascinating because from the senior leadership, from the C-suite, they were totally bought into this idea in terms of where education is going and the flipped classrooms and all those things. But within the existing organization, there was huge reticence about it, and it actually resulted in us having to decide to set up that other company and put it in a completely different physical space, because we wanted it to have a very, very different, you mentioned culture, a different culture, and it would have been submerged into the mothership otherwise, and it wouldn't have been able to truly have been allowed to compete on its own.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I think it's a great idea, and I'd love to see more companies do it. I think that'd be really, really interesting. How did that go, by the way? It
was very difficult. I think it was very difficult for the existing organization, but it was very good because it opened up a new revenue stream for them as well. And actually, in the end, what happened was they decided, rather than keep them as completely separate competitors, to take the best pieces and actually put it in, and actually the main business has been going through a huge transformation, and so it's kind of turned things upside down a little bit for them, and obviously it's created a lot of creative destruction in the process. But I think at the end of it, you're going to get a much better thing, because it's going to allow them to focus on what their audience, what their customer wants now, which is maybe different from when that organization initially kind of started. Imagine, let's say you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you've got all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you. You don't know anyone. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Keep learning, keep networking, keep sharing. I guess that'd probably be. I'd probably just keep doing what I'm doing now, just without anybody knowing who I am. So build it up again, because I think the learning part of it is so important. Nobody ever stops learning, and the moment that somebody thinks they know it all is the moment they should probably be put out to pasture, let's say. The networking thing is great. It's for me, networking isn't about, hey, I'm James, nice to meet you, know who I am. It's about learning from people again, like understanding what it is that they do, how they think about things differently. Like, one thing that gives me a real buzz is something that can make me think differently. So it's almost like trying to disrupt myself all the time. If I can hear something that makes, I go, gee, you know what? I've never thought about it that way before. I get a massive buzz off that. And then, of course, sharing it as well. Sharing these ideas so other people can start to think like that too. And other people can push back, and people say, well, no, I disagree because, or yes, I agree because, and having that debate and really trying to refine the ideas, because you can't just do it all by yourself. And that's why it's so good that the customer experience community is growing at the moment. And there's more and more of us out there trying to do this stuff. And I think it's a nice community, because I don't see any other consultants out there or any other authors or anything as competitors. I just see them as other people trying to do a very similar thing that I'm trying to do, and we should all really be helping each other. So, yeah, what was it? Learning, networking, and sharing. That's what I'd do.
Awesome. And the new book, Put Your Customer Second, is going to be coming out soon, but you've very, very kindly agreed to, you're offering up the first 3 chapters of the book available for everyone that's listening just now. Where should they go? How can they get hold of those first 3 chapters?
Just go to jamesdodkins.com, and I'm not doing it to be kind. I'm doing it to sell more books. So, there you go, honesty. No, it's a case of I'll send 3 chapters. If you like it, you might want to buy the book. If you don't like it, you might not. But it's just at least you can get the information. And the thing is, the 3 chapters won't be the final version either. So it's kind of like you're getting like a little sneak peek into the unfinished version. Yeah, which is fun.
You're seeing the minimum viable product of the book start as well. And if people want to kind of connect with you, is there a particular social media platform that you use more than others, or should they just head over to the website?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, LinkedIn, I guess. Just grab me on LinkedIn. Or there's like contact forms through my website.
Well, James, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today about customer centricity and customer experience. I wish you all the best with this new book. I'm looking forward to hearing you speak on stage at some point soon as well. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.